Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Dana. I was born and raised in Kentucky in the United States, but now I live in Japan. And I make videos to help you learn English. In this series, I teach you how to explain Japanese culture and words in English. If you have friends or coworkers from other countries, this video will be very helpful. Let's get started. Today's topic is expressing common Japanese greetings in English. For example, お疲れ様です。よろしくお願いします。お世話になります。先に失礼します。Do you have any idea how to say these phrases in English? It's difficult, right? Honestly, when my students ask me how to say these phrases in English, it's difficult to answer sometimes. That's because these phrases don't really exist in English. We don't have these phrases. They are strongly connected to Japanese culture. So we have to think about culture when we translate them into English. Let's look at them one by one and see how to express them in English. We will start with お疲れ様です。Sometimes I see students translate this phrase as thanks for your hard work or you must be tired. There are certain situations where these phrases can be used, but I wouldn't recommend them. Instead, let me share some more natural ways to say this in English. Also, I've noticed this phrase is basically used in two ways in Japan. So one is after doing hard work, for example, at the office. The other way is as a casual greeting, like お疲れ. So let's look at these two situations. First, imagine you're at the workplace. And at the end of the day, you want to say お疲れ様でした to your coworkers. In this case, in English, we would usually say, Have a good evening, everyone. Have a good evening, everyone. In some situations, for example, if there was a very difficult task that day, you could also say, Good work today, everyone. Good work today, everyone. Now, imagine you meet up with friends in the evening to go out for dinner. When you see your friend, you might say, Oh, お疲れ, right? Like this. But in English, we would just say, Hey, good to see you. Hey, good to see you. I know this sounds nothing like お疲れ. And the reason for that is in English, we don't have this kind of cultural expression. Instead, we just use regular greetings. Next, let's move on to よろしくお願いします. This one is also difficult to say in English. So I have seen people translate this as please treat me well. But this sounds unnatural, so again, I wouldn't recommend this phrase. First, let's think about the situation where we use this phrase. It's often used when a new relationship starts, right? For example, when meeting a new person. Imagine you are taking a group English lesson and a new student joins your class. You might say to them, はじめまして、よろしくお願いします. Like this. So in English, what can we say? In English, we would simply say, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. That's it. I know this may feel strange because はじめまして means nice to meet you. So what about よろしくお願いします? What about this part? Well, the most natural option is to just leave it out. We don't say anything. Again, in English, we don't have this kind of cultural expression. But if you want to sound a little more friendly, you could say, Nice to meet you. We're happy to have you. Nice to meet you. We're happy to have you. But nice to meet you is enough. Now, the second situation. よろしくお願いします can also be used when asking for a favor, right? When making a request. If it's to a friend, you might ask them to do something and then say, よろしく、よろしくね. In this case, we would use another phrase in English. So you could say, thanks a bunch. Thanks a bunch. Or appreciate it. Appreciate it. If it's to a coworker, you could say, thank you in advance. Thank you in advance. In American culture, we often thank people before the request is completed, which is why we use these kind of expressions here. Okay, on to the third expression. お世話になります. I have seen people translate this one as thank you for taking care of me, but this is not natural. Take care of is usually used for like taking care of babies or taking care of a pet, for example. So we can't directly translate this phrase either. In Japanese, if my understanding is correct, this phrase is used at 3 different stages: the beginning, middle, and end of some relationship. So let's look at each stage. First, imagine you start working with a new client or partner at your company. You would probably say, either in person or through email, お世話になります. Since this is a client, in English you could say, thank you for choosing us. Thank you for choosing us. Or, we look forward to working with you. We look forward to working with you. If it's your first time contacting or speaking to this person, you could also say, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure to meet you. This is similar to nice to meet you, but more formal. Now, what if the relationship is ongoing? So this is in the middle of the relationship. In this case, you would say in Japanese, お世話になっております. Right? I often see this in Japanese business emails. In English, you could say, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing well. This is a very common business email greeting. Or if it's on the phone, you could say, it's a pleasure to speak with you again. It's a pleasure to speak with you again. Lastly, when a relationship is coming to an end, you're finished working with someone, you might say in Japanese, 大変お世話になりました. In English, we focus on expressing appreciation. Appreciation, so saying thank you. So we might say, thank you for everything. Thank you for everything. This is a very general phrase that you can use in many different situations. At work, you could also say, it's been great working with you. It's been great working with you. As you can see, お世話になる is also difficult to translate into English. You need to choose the right phrase based on the stage of the relationship. Okay, last part, we're going to talk about 先に失礼します. This is a very interesting cultural expression, I think, because it includes the word 失礼, which is related to being impolite, to being not polite. Because of this, I sometimes see it translated as, for example, excuse me for leaving before you. It sounds like an apology. Now, in English, we think about this situation differently. By the way, this phrase is most commonly used at work, right? For example, after you finish your tasks, you say this to your coworkers who need to stay in the office because you are leaving first. In this situation, in English, you could say, I'm heading out. I'm heading out. Or very simply, see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. If you want to sound a bit more formal, you could say, have a good evening. Have a good evening. Basically, we just say goodbye. We don't express regret for leaving first. This phrase is also used more casually, though, in Japan, right? For example, if you're out drinking with coworkers and you need to leave early, you might say, 先に失礼するね。先に失礼するね。In English, you could use phrases similar to the ones I just shared, like, I'm heading out first. I'm heading out first. Or, see everyone tomorrow. See everyone tomorrow. Among friends in Japan, you use a shorter version as well, right? お先. お先. In English, you might say, I'm out. I'm out. Or, I gotta go. I gotta go. See ya. Like this. So to sum up, when you want to express 先に失礼します in English, it's most natural to just use a normal goodbye. Now that's all for today's video. The most important takeaway from this video is some Japanese phrases can't be directly translated into English because of cultural differences. So, don't try to translate Japanese into English in your head. Instead, remember a few natural phrases for each situation. Remember a couple phrases from this video and use them when you encounter that situation. Okay, I hope this was helpful for everyone. I'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone.